So I'm Gary Olson and Rick Singer, and not so much on the use case side, but more about what's looking forward into the future and take some of the things that are going on, even though AI is more future than present, as our colleague James just brought out. And since I wasn't in any of the sessions, I figured that we would just touch a little bit on all the words that are used to discuss what everybody considers AI, and as a firm believer that it doesn't exist yet, that machine learning and it's teaching a machine how to do something. Deep Blue learned how to play chess. It couldn't play checkers. Deep learning, Google built AlphaGo, that when it went from an 18-inch board to a 24-inch board got confused. And cognitive computing, where IBM's Watson won Jeopardy, but couldn't figure out that Bob Dylan was a 1960s anti-war poet. So artificial intelligence, and I think I'll use one of James's slides, had inference. So how do you actually figure out what's interesting? Right now, from a multitasking perspective, I'm looking, I'm listening, I'm thinking about dinner. All of you are doing 12 other things, forming an opinion about the conversation, where the inference, the deductive understanding, and reasoning behind AI. So with that being said, it's all about data. And AI is all about understanding data, using clever algorithms and tools to analyze data, to use data to perform different aspects of things, both from an automation perspective, orchestration perspective, and structured data in relational databases, semi-structured, partial relationship, partial buckets of bits, and unstructured big buckets of bits with no indexing, cataloging, and clever new tools to be able to take advantage of it and use it in ways that we haven't been able to do before, where the human instinct has the intelligence but doesn't have the speed or necessarily efficiencies to be able to process at the rate that computers can. So most artificial intelligence systems, as we just learned, are a combination of technologies. So there's recognition technologies that identify something, and there's different recognition. There's image recognition, there's facial recognition, there's object recognition. All of these things need to be pulled together under an umbrella of orchestration that then provide a full image or perspective of how these new algorithms are able to perform and do different tasks under the premise of, in this particular case, the media supply chain. And for the purposes of our discussion, we feel that there's many different components, but there's 8 major elements within the entire media supply chain, and we believe that across each of them, there's some relevance and the use of artificial intelligence or machine learning or deep learning or whatever you'd like to call it that have some value. And my illustrious colleague here.
Well, Gary, as we've been saying, as we try to distill the essence of what are now still just proofs of concept, but we're talking about the frontiers of AI for media and entertainment production and distribution. And we've seen some very interesting and successful, in some cases, introductions and uses as we talk about now in the production side. Let's look at project development of stories, as Thomas Edwards said earlier in his observation, that it is all about stories, and that's a human element that we can't foresee this being reproduced or recreated with artificial narrow intelligence, and who knows if and when artificial general intelligence would try to replace human beings. So at this point, we're looking at, in the 8 phases, this is essentially the same paradigm we've had for 100 years of motion pictures, except it was mechanical and electrical, and the audience was definitely appointment viewing when you show up at the theater at the appointed time with your ticket. But throughout all that, the processes were intelligent, but used by humans. So now we've got AI able to provide us with analytics, which is at the end. I got my little cat mouse chaser there. As you can see, there's analytics. It's very important to realize that that's one of the greatest benefits that we'll get out of the analytics in our business, is that the information about the viewers, how they've engaged, what they watch, how much they like to watch things, and what programs they want to see in the future can all be distilled through AI and analytics. So I'll just pick one of these various topics. You can imagine that it would be kind of horrifying to watch a movie scripted by a robot. It might be entertaining to robots, I'm not sure, but it can be used to help analyze the value of a property. That is what they call scripts as they come in, or concepts for shows, and there are readers who have to go through stacks, and they evaluate them at the beginning, just are they the right number of pages and in the right format. But once they've identified a property that could make a good return on investment, then they could find the appropriate crew and the cast, and even help find locations that would create great efficiencies in lowering costs, and of course, finding the ideal budget that's balanced. Now, here's an interesting proof of concept that I'd share with you. I don't know if any of you watched the US Open, but IBM's Watson has a proof of concept that has actually been used for tens of thousands. I'm not even sure what numbers of viewers they have, but huge numbers who are watching highlight reels that were compiled by AI, machine learning tools that watched hundreds and hundreds of hours of tennis and making choices based on audience reaction, cheering, player gestures. It's quite remarkable, and viewers were surprised later to find out that wasn't done by human beings. It was actually done by humans, but they were augmented, and it allows for the quick turnaround of content. And similarly, in news production, where we're familiar with the use of AI, even in its infancy, as doing speech-to-text, natural language processing for translation, and so forth. But in time to air, this is something where AI has some great potential, and it really hasn't been, brought to actual use. It's just conceptual at this point. But since we're talking about frontiers, this is a great frontier. Here's an example. Last month, Rachel Maddow, an MSNBC host, started off her show with her rundown sheets in front of her, and she tossed them in the air dramatically, as she's apt to do, and said, well, we're going to have to start all over. And back in her IFB, I could tell she was listening to them trying to respond and get the footage up that was needed at the right place at the right time, based on the information that was coming in at that very moment. That's something that is very challenging even for the best, most seasoned producers to do. But that's just one of many examples of how AI could augment professional talent. And in this case, I'm talking about not on-camera talent, but the people behind the IFB who are trying to bring up the footage and the stories when she's ready to comment on them.
And then there's asset management. And as we talk about AI or the use of machine learning, deep learning, and cognitive understanding, and there's a lot of experimental things. We're currently involved in some experimental technology that can look across multiple databases. So an asset can be a picture, an asset can be audio, an asset can be video, an asset can be text, social media. And when somebody is, as Rick pointed out, looking across all of these different data sets to pull together, whether it's a journalist for a story or something that's in real time, the ability to look across multiple data sets, multiple data types, and multiple data formats, and pull it together quickly and efficiently for augmenting a story and supporting something that's going on, that these tools are most effective in the volume of data that's available, and whether it's historic data, it's current data, it's augmenting something that is happening in real time, that using these tools in asset management, not just what is it, where did I put it, how do I find it again, but more importantly, how many different things, how many different types are contributory to the story that I'm trying to tell. And instead of having 300 interns, each one looking through a different tool set into a different database without understanding why they're working together or they're not working together, the AI could bring together a lot of this information and orchestrate it together, curate it together, and bring it together for somebody in the human space to be able to use it efficiently and effectively. Oop. And in talking about the recognition side of this, or thinking about the bots, that recognition falls into, everybody knows what facial recognition is. We all watch TV, and we all know that, you can pick, a child out of a crowd of 1 million people until you actually apply it in real life. And as most of the law enforcement people will tell you, it's a little on the hard side, let alone what I know happens on Hawaii 5-0 and minority and all of these other things. The other thing that is challenging more than anything else is body language and facial expression. And one of the things that we see coming in the future as we explore what could be happening is, am I smiling? Am I frowning? Do my eyebrows move in a way that is giving me a tell on something that I might be using words as opposed to not expression? One of our colleagues did a software study in talking to doctors, and they were using dermatologists to analyze something on somebody's skin, and by using natural language processing, listening to their voice, were able to tell whether the doctor knew or didn't know whether or not, or what the actual thing was. So there's a lot of work being done in voice understanding, natural language processing, and a lot of these technologies are culling together and are developing and improving that could have value when we start looking at storytelling and culling together different information, backgrounds on scripts, documentaries. And then there's post.
Right, and for post, it's a real challenge for those who make documentaries. The shooting ratios for documentaries are an order of magnitude greater than for any scripting shows, and as we've heard mentioned many times today, that even those hours and hours of scripted shows have a lot of footage that the cameras are rolling all the time, and so one of the things that AI can help scripted production do is take the script and do a rough cut, or as some call it in the industry, string outs. So it's actually doing the job of an assistant editor and identifies additional footage from the script. It helps do a search of content that might be relevant shots so that when the director comes in, they can use the metadata that has already been the geolocation and other footage, including rights management. And putting together a documentary, there's a good reason that these projects take years, the ones that we all love and watch on Discovery Channel and National Geo and so forth. That's just on the opposite side of what we talked about earlier, which was quick turn to air, which we used in the Rachel Maddow anecdote. At any rate, there's so much to cover here, and we just have to be selective. Disturbing content alerts is an interesting use case, where in different cultures, what is considered offensive in one culture is not. We've all heard the stories about different gestures which are complimentary in one culture and not in the other. And that's something that AI can analyze and alert, and also correlate to what country is. So you would actually have a learning base that was based on what would be seen in what culture and flag it for that, that particular geographical and cultural location, what channel it would be on, as well as what's offensive in what language, and you wouldn't pick it up if it was in English and that sort of thing.
And then there's the area of distribution and delivery, which, interestingly enough, we didn't find, or maybe it's just us, a lot of use where AI has a play, because most of it, and this is where I think there's a great misunderstanding between what automation, orchestration, and AI is. So the ability to cleverly put together a number of different clips and what we used to call conforming in editing is automation. It's not intelligence, it's not artificial, and there's, even in a learning process, taking an EDL and turning it into a finished product is not artificial intelligence, it's orchestration. But at the same time, and if you take a look at the entire supply chain and the revenue streams and how those revenue streams are generated, if you can personalize an ad by an eyeball as opposed to a demographic community or a region, a DMA, and with a lot of the data that's being retrieved from mobile devices, from connected devices, from OTT, as well as conventional distribution, that the ability to take that information back, identify who your viewer is, and it's being done across social platforms, it's being done every time you browse, that the ability to target your ads to a specific user and whether or not there's value there, but that's where AI could have some play in delivery and distribution. And in viewer engagement probably has the highest application for AI, as all of the content that we're creating has some level of transactional component to it. In sports, we're running fantasy games on top of live games. And what's going on in the background transactionally with the interactivity by individual users, by collectors, by groups of users, personalizing that experience and the ability to personalize the viewer's experience and enrich the viewer's experience, which obviously improves engagement, and then provides greater information back to the mothership, where the analytics tools, where AI has tremendous application in the ability, again, as all of this data is being collected, and it's being collected into various large exabytes and yettabytes and zettabytes, and I don't know what the next wordabytes is, that using different AI tools provide good information quickly and provide better information back to the decision makers who are selecting what the next product that they want to create is, or whether or not what they're doing in a campaign is successful, and all of the other dynamics that go into good decision making and ultimately good program creation. And I believe
well, it takes us back to the top of the loop, which is creating new content, which would be customized for all of us. So, questions?
Wow. Uh-oh.
Here we go.
Lots of possibilities, but what's the low-hanging fruit, do you think, from your analysis? And what's the highest hanging fruit, just to separate the two?
I would say that the lowest hanging fruit is probably in, let's call it, asset management and the time-to-air aspect of discovery and search across multiple different data types and data sets for storytelling. I think some of the tougher things that will be taking more time, I mean, one of the things that is very, particularly in this town, as things are being digitized and vast, vast libraries are being digitized for preservation, that the recognition technologies are something that everybody is looking forward to be able to not just scrape information, but to catalog and index it.
EBU. One question in regard to the skill sets required at broadcast stations. What do you believe is required? How should they prepare themselves for this new type of technologies to be used?
What a really good question. And I have no idea.
Well, I think I've got an idea, but it's not original for me, but it's from things that I've read. It sounds as if that you've got these large AI as a service providers, IBM, Amazon, Google, and so forth. And they're designing their applications, image recognition, natural language processing, and so forth, which are very popular across many, many verticals. And now they're being applied, but they're not. They've got their limitations, and one of the problems is that everyone's application is going to be slightly different, not just within our industry, but also in specific use cases. So I think the systems integrators of the past that we used to, and we still do now with SMPTE 2110 and 2022 and all studio video over IP is a different form of challenge, and there's a lot of sessions on that. But this has a lot more to do with use cases for cloud and using customized, bespoke type of orchestration on site. So that's what I think is the real challenge going forward.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be hiring consultants like Gary.
Well, but also, I think, giving it a little bit more thought, I mean, as things went from, as editing changed and became computer-based, you didn't have to understand how to build the edit system. You had to learn the interface. And as it started to mature, and the dashboards and the user interfaces became more friendly with training, and I don't know that intuitive would be a good word, I think the same thing is going on where the dashboards and the user interfaces will be built and designed so that it's not taking a data scientist to do the programming, that, you know, I wouldn't call it simple, but the ability to compare it to common tools that are being used today, whether it is an editing tool, whether it's an automation tool, that it will be a similar kind of training process.
Also, I think it's the AI components, the AI agents are going to be built into software, particularly as it gets built into the cloud. Take, for example, our popular nonlinear editing. We had a cloud editing session. I think it was presented, I forgot the presenter's name, it was Avid. Not to name the big A company, but the point is they're going heavy into this because it's part of the customization process. As we go forward, and in my vision of the future is that your editing tool will not just follow you like you would take your settings today. An editor, craft editors in particular, no matter where they're working, they'll carry their disk with their personalized settings so they can edit anywhere. Well, in this case, it'll learn how you've edited, and so it becomes even more and more valuable because it knows your habits, and it knows and eventually it'll watch the video, your timeline for you. So right now we're looking at use cases or trials in which there's a possibility of being able to populate the timeline. But now, if you got a personal editor online talking to you like Siri or Alexa or whatever your personal assistant is, it will be your personal editorial assistant. And that's just one idea that has potential.
So, Tom Coughlin, you're kind of answering some of the question I was going to ask, but it was, can you give recommendations of particular AI tools for these different aspects of workflow?
Well, image recognition tools. There's Amazon has recognition, and you've got natural language processing tools, which is natural language understanding and natural language generation, which are, again, these are things that are being used all across many applications and in the web. But I think that it's not something you're just going to connect your system with an API. You know, there's lots of RESTful APIs, but really, how do you fully integrate it? I think the answer is there's a lot of specialization. There's a lot of moving parts under the hood. Since we started this discussion, I started working with Gary on his Media Maestro project 6 months ago. I realized I had a lot to learn under the hood. And, you know, like Gary, we're both electrical engineers, but what we studied in school had nothing in common with this. We learned it all as we've gone along, and then you realize how much there is to learn. And that is the ultimate collaboration. We're talking about these tools to help augment us and make us better engineers and better creative people. But it takes a team of minds today and in the years ahead to really pull all these tools together so they work seamlessly and interface with us in new and novel ways.
Some of the workflows, and I hate to say this in this room, but you know, they're clearly at their infancy, and still a lot of science projects in terms of how do you include this. I mean, I did a funny experiment with Watson's speech-to-text, and I was translating a memorial service that was interspersed with Hebrew. And Watson did an amazing job on the English and had no idea that the language changed. At NAB, I was talking to a company that had amazing speech-to-text translation capability and 75 languages. I said, that's phenomenal. How do you change languages? They said, what? I said, how do you change languages? If I'm speaking and all of a sudden I intersperse je ne sais quoi into my language and I do not speak French, so don't start with me, the question is, what will happen when the speech-to-text translator does that. So again, as long as you tell it what to do, and I think James did an amazing job talking about training. And the one thing that differentiates artificial technology from humans is the kind of training that it takes and the ability to differentiate from different things. That when you train it to do one thing, so if I train it to look at a soccer pitch and then I change the location, is the technology smart enough to know I changed the location, or do I have to teach it all over again?
Well, that brings you back to the point you made earlier about Deep Blue and Go at the very beginning, is that they are brilliant, but they can't be taught another game. All they can do is learn better moves in the game that they're being trained to learn. And that's our
I think that's it.
limitations.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please tap the like button and also subscribe to our channel to receive notifications when we add new content. For more information about us, please visit SMPTE.org. We'll see you next time.